When I entered the house, the kitchen light was on. I opened the door and saw my lover Brad leaving. I thought my husband was already asleep, but in the kitchen I saw Jack's silhouette. It all seemed so wrong to me. I regretted letting my lover sleep with me right before he drove me home. It was another "screw you" from him to Jack. I didn't think Jack knew about Brad. I was an idiot. Jesse, we need to talk," Jack said. Oh God, he's stuttering. This is important because for most of his young life, Jack stuttered so badly that it was usually impossible to understand him. They called him Stutter Jack. We met in college where we were taking advanced math classes. There were 8 people in the class, and Jack was the only one who wasn't failing. The professor wasn't helpful, he just confused us even more. We were sitting in the cafeteria when I said, "For the first time in my life, I'm sitting in a lecture and I don't understand what the professor is talking about. I have an exam coming up and I don't know where to start." Jack, who rarely spoke a word, stammered, "I'll help you." We looked at him in bewilderment. We knew he understood everything, but we couldn't understand him any better than the professor. I took his hand and said, "I don't know how this will work, Jack." He looked at my hand, smiled, and as clearly as if it were written on paper, explained how to solve the first problem on the test we had just failed. At first, I had to hold his hand or sit next to him. By the end of the semester, he had stopped stuttering. And then, we fell in love. Or rather, Jack fell in love with me. But now he was stuttering again, maybe even worse than before. Jack tried to say something else, but couldn't get my name out. He took out the yellow notebook, just like the day I first met him. He wrote something and showed it to me. "I know everything about Brad. I've known for a long time. Please go wash your face before I throw up on you." I wanted to say something, but he raised his hand. "Just in case," I added a little more deodorant. Returning to the table with my husband, or rather, my ex-husband, I said, "I want you to know that I broke up with Brad today." He wrote in his notebook, "There were others before Brad, and there will be others after Brad." What? How did you find out? When did you find out? He wrote in his notebook, "Are you trying to hide your affairs better?" I knew I was blushing, but that wasn't what I asked. I just phrased the question wrong. I meant, "Jack, if you knew about this before, why are you divorcing me now?" "Brad doesn't respect me, you laugh with him, you don't respect me." "That's not true, Jack." He wrote so quickly and with such force that he tore the paper and wrote, "Then why was your underwear dirty when you came over?" I started crying. He handed me the divorce papers and a copy of the private investigator's report. On the cover of the report, he wrote, "Brad's wife received a copy this afternoon." "Why, Jack, she doesn't deserve this." He said in his voice, "She damn well deserves to know." There was no stutter in that sentence, and I recoiled from his anger. He wrote again, "I am terminating the marriage contract. You have 3 days to get out of my house. Our joint credit cards are canceled as of 10 p.m. tonight. I have left you half the money in our account. You have 3 days to use your cell phone, after which it will be disconnected. Any questions?" All of these statements were written on separate pieces of paper. The kitchen floor was now covered with yellow sheets. I shook my head no in response to the question. "Any questions?" Jack stood up, grabbed the bag with his things that was lying on the floor next to him, and left. I sat there, and it took me back to that advanced math class when I didn't know where to start. Brad called and started yelling into the phone, "Why did your weak husband tell my wife about our affair?" "I don't think he's weak, Brad." I hung up and blocked his number. As I got dressed, I tried to remember when I fell out of love with Jack. Even before we got married, I knew I didn't love him. I admired him. He was incredibly intelligent. The math problems we struggled with were simple arithmetic for him. The difficulty was explaining them to us mere mortals. My first mistake was seducing him one night. It was easy, and he fell even more in love with me. I was his first, and he often said I would be his only. Our sex was warm and tender. I don't think Jack had ever seen an adult movie, and he had no idea how to satisfy me. My fear of hurting his feelings prevented me from giving him advice. I remember the first time I cheated on Jack, 2 years after our wedding. Sex with Jack was tender but boring, and I needed something new. It was just a one-night stand while I was on a business trip. I felt terrible. The second time was easier psychologically. I'm not sure I remember everything. There was a visiting professor from England, and he was the first man I spent several nights with. I had been faithful to Jack for only 2 years, and since then I have cheated on him almost constantly. In the morning, I read the private investigator's report over my cup of coffee. I felt sick. It became clear that I was a terrible person, no better than those who teased Jack about his stutter. The awful things Brad said about Jack and how I echoed him, laughing at my weak husband. No wonder Jack was divorcing me. There was a folder on the table that I hadn't noticed the night before. When I opened it, I found details of most of my affairs, even my very first one. Some I remembered, some I didn't. But it didn't matter. 8 of us who had been in the advanced math class remained friends for many years. Another couple got married, and 2 of the guys turned out to be gay and got married too. We all worked in higher mathematics, so we often saw each other at various conferences. But the weddings were wonderful because they gave us a chance to get together, all 8 of us. Jill was the odd one out in our original group of 8. She never married and, as far as I know, never dated. She was alone at all the weddings. Sometimes I thought she was a lesbian, but I was never sure. Jill was nice, and I'm sure many men were interested in her. Maybe she was dating someone but kept it a secret. I decided to call her, perhaps looking for sympathy. "Hi, Jill. It's Jesse. I don't know why I'm calling you, but Jack is divorcing me." "Finally, damn it!" I was shocked. "Jesse, remember that we all work in a very difficult field and earn good money. None of us would be here if Jack hadn't helped us get through that course, and it only took you 2 years to start cheating on him." Poor Jack. None of us in our little group of 8 could understand why he stayed with you for so long. We begged him to leave you, but he refused. By the way, we all knew how you cheated on him at every conference we went to. You have a pretty bad reputation in our profession, but not the kind most women would want. You won't get any sympathy from me, and if you caught on fire, I wouldn't even help you put it out. And don't expect sympathy from anyone else in our group. I'm probably the only one who will answer your call, but from this moment on, you're blocked. And I always thought I was so careful. Was I the laughing stock of our profession, or the whore of our profession? Was I the one who didn't deserve respect? It's been many years since I was invited to speak at a conference, and almost as many since I was able to publish an article. I tried to pack my things, but I couldn't hold back the tears as I realized how I had ruined my life. Between packing boxes, I called apartment rental agencies. I had no idea how expensive rent was. Finally, I called a moving company to put my things in storage and decided to stay in a hotel for a while until I found something more permanent. Before the movers arrived, I took one last look at what had once been our home. It was one of the best houses on campus. Houses like this were reserved for the most important department heads. I loved the ivy-covered walls, the beautiful landscaping, and the huge stone courtyard. Most of all, I loved the long, winding path leading to the front door and the huge chandelier visible through the window. My parents almost wet themselves when they saw it for the first time. After I settled into the hotel, I sent Jack a text message saying I was leaving. There was no reply. By the time I was finally divorced, I had a few $100s in the bank, a credit card with a $1,000 limit, and I was living in the same apartment I had when I was a graduate student. 7 years after marrying Jack, I was in exactly the same position I had been in before I got married. I deserved it. A year after the divorce, I went to a local conference. Jack was one of the keynote speakers and was scheduled to speak last, which was the most prestigious spot. I was looking forward to seeing him. The night before the main conference, I went to a party. There was a strange atmosphere among the women. I felt like everyone was avoiding me, None of the conference participants spoke to me. I wandered around the room feeling more and more uncomfortable with every step, when suddenly I heard Jack's voice. Jack didn't stutter. His deep baritone drew me to him. He was standing in the center of our group of 8 people discussing some economic model when he noticed me. The rest of the group turned to look at me. No one nodded or said hello, they just stared at me. Then I noticed that Jill had put her arm around Jack. Jill was the only one who smiled at me. Jack said, "Hi, Jesse. You look good." Then he continued his story. The group turned away from me, except for Jill, who continued to smile at me, and then I noticed her rounded belly. Jill must have been in love with him the whole time we were in Octate, waiting for me to ruin my marriage. Her patience was remarkable. I was happy for Jack and envied what Jill had. I had talked to Jack many times about starting a family, but he always put it off. Obviously, he didn't want to start a family with a cheater like me. In the end, I found myself back where I was before Jack. It seemed as if the entire industry had turned its back on me. Not only did I stop being invited to conferences, but I was also removed from guest lists. Things were difficult at the university because I wasn't publishing any articles. How could I explain that everything I sent to publishers came back unopened? I risked losing my job, and my ex-husband was the head of my department. I arranged a meeting with him. He was very gracious. "Come in, Jesse, have a seat." No sign of stuttering. I congratulated him on the birth of his daughter. He said, "I'm so happy about this girl, you have no idea, but how can I help you, Jesse?" "Jack, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. I can't get anything published, and you know how much the university values the recognition of its professors. Jesse, as long as I'm chair of the department, you'll never be fired, and I plan to stay here for a long time." I thanked him and got ready to leave. I wanted to say I was sorry about how things had ended between us, but I saw the malicious look in his eyes. I turned and walked away. On the way home, I realized that I would never be fired, but I would always live in the same shitty apartment I had lived in when I first met Jack. I hadn't paid much attention to the professional lives of the other members of our octet, but that day I Googled each of them. They were all successful, heading departments at other universities or working in the private sector. They all had long lists of publications, many of which were co-authored with Jack. I was too busy having sex while Jack was helping our friends succeed. Jill had the most articles and the most co-authored works with Jack. The odd one out in our group of 8 was an Asian guy named Danny Sue. I Googled him and found out that he had developed his own energy trading software. His company went public around the same time Jack filed for divorce. Danny became a billionaire overnight, as did his early investors, other people from our group of 8. Danny was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Economics. I wondered why I hadn't been invited to be one of the early investors, and the answer was obvious. I also discovered that all the other members of our group of 8 were on the editorial boards of professional journals in which we published our articles. They had the right to veto any publication. While I was entertaining the men, they set a trap for me that I couldn't escape. Jill kept Jack close, waiting for me to go too far, and when I did, she was there to support him. Now she was carrying his children and living in the beautiful house that had once been mine.